Well, we can get to these questions as we go, but I had a vision. I'll hog the first question here, Kaarin. It occurred to me that Matt is at the front of what's going on with AI, and that Andrew is where Andrew is thinking about our what matters most to us, and that Joe is in between there. And apropos what you were wondering about, Andrew, with radical information architecture practice, do you all know about Nightshade?
No.
It's a technology that artists can use to make their artwork poison for AI systems.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Huh?
What if what Joe knows is going to make what Matt can do go faster toward what we don't want? Based on what you told us about the risk to our soft, beautiful human bodies and the wood chipper that Matt's standing in front of, should Joe nightshade his map so that it can't be used to make the wood chipper bigger or add teeth to it or move it closer to the rest of us?
A question for me or who?
For everyone.
Maybe question. Everyone?
Okay, let's just look at the panelists and not the slide screen at all.
Yeah, they know who we are.
I'll jump in, I guess, because you mentioned the wood chipper. Well, I mean, I saw another article somewhere that was like reasons why that poison kind of thing is maybe overhyped and maybe isn't going to work so great. And regardless, I mean, it seems to me like it's the same thing we're in with spammers and everything else, where it's just this escalation, right? Of coming up with protections, and those get routed around and blah blah blah. I mean, ultimately, there has to be regulation, right? There had to be regulation, or else, we'd still be drinking laudanum with elderberries in it or whatever, thinking that we were curing lupus. Not that there aren't plenty of questionable pharmaceuticals in the world still, but you get my drift. So ultimately, I do think that a lot of these bigger issues, this is what humans do, right? I mean, I keep remembering how I learned in school when I was a kid that the Romans built out all these lead-based aquifers and plumbing infrastructure, and then they just killed people with lead poisoning. And we knew that for a long time, but they didn't stop lead gasoline until I was a kid. So, people my age were walking around with lead poisoning. It's great. So, we're slow learners, we humans, but we impulsively shove shit into the world and then have to clean it up. And I think that there are risks. I think this stuff got shoved into the world way too fast. And I think a lot of organizations made some really impulsive decisions about how to apply it. That's really where my concern is coming from, is that scale, right? I think as individuals, we can do what we can do, but yeah, governments are going to have to get together and be like, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe we should have truth in labeling about what it is. Maybe we should be able to have a way to track provenance of where the information came from, that kind of stuff.
How about you, Joe, as a potential creator of a technology that could be added to those technologies to change how they work, to make them do what they already do more and faster?
Yeah, I to oversimplify a dichotomy of people in service of harms or evil and people in service of good, the more that we can decentralize the power to make sense of things and understand what's going on, I think I think that's our best tool against things happening that we don't understand behind the scenes and then realizing, oh, it's too late. This machine already has all this energy behind it. The entire GDP of the country is relying on it. We can't possibly turn that off. How can we get ahead of it? And helping people increase their literacy in making sense of an increasingly complex and interconnected world, I think it'll be helpful. Sure as hell hope.
Thank you. I like it. Kaarin, as a product leader, are you being asked to add to grease the wheels of how your organization adds more AI things to what you make?
It is definitely a part of life. This conversation is part of all of our lives. I think what Joe presented is the opposite of impulsive and should never be nightshaded. Like my personal emotional journey today was like comforted that we all get to keep our jobs in the future because we still need to structure data, and then challenged to not be shitty, and then supported by a really classic evergreen tool that we all need to slow down and consider the world.
Speaking of jobs and roles for people like us, and we've got some School of Information folks in the room with us here in Ann Arbor. I was thinking as I was listening to the first presentation about librarianship. As some of you might know, librarianship is a root back to what radicalism means. If that means to be rooted, one of the roots of IA is librarianship. And when I was in library school, probably the most powerful thing that I learned was called the reference interview. Did you ever learn that, Kaarin?
Mm-mm.
It was you are the human interface to the information resources. And you were taught how to make it into something that make what the customer or the patron presents with into something that the library might be able to provide.
The translator between the database and the person with the squishy thoughts about I need to know a thing.
Yeah, the interface.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I always thought of that as, that is so great, because if we're gonna design interfaces, then if we all, or if some of us have the training of being the interface, it reminds me of that technique of body storming, where you enact the parts of a system with your human body in order to understand better. Librarians are an interface to an information system. And when I was hearing about all of the ways that that the work, it's all the stuff that we're unwilling to do for each other, it seems like, is what we heard needs to be done, what Matt said we need to do to all the data, all the information. So everything in the library, all the stuff we're not willing to do for each other, to make each other able to access that. Unless you're a reference librarian, then you will. But it sounded like that's what needed to be done. And then I thought about my friend Alexis, and they are a cataloger. And they are usually in the back. You never see them at the library. They are in technical services, which was always a second-class citizen to the user experience of delivering library service from the desk. And I'm looking at my mind's eye picture of what Matt's laying down. I'm trying to pick it up, and I'm like, oh, and I drew a little picture. Cataloger is usually sitting there at a desk looking at an item and describing it so that it can be used in the information system. The prompt engineers are the catalogers describing a book that doesn't exist yet, so that the system can make it on the fly. And those are the people who are trained the least to interact with humans. They're trained to interact with objects. And the people who are trained to work with people, that reference librarians, are going to be reduced to the role of fluffing the data for the machine. And how weird it is, our role. So I've always thought of myself as a fancified reference librarian. If what you were observing, Kaarin, is true, that there's job security for us, we're moving to the back in the stacks where nobody sees us, and we're massaging the content for the machine to use, and that the real magician now is the cataloger who finds a way to describe a resource that doesn't exist yet, but who can conjure it after us human-centered designers go back and never talk to a human again and just massage the data all day. So how do you like that?
That's not my takeaway, because we're the people who help the people figure out what the heck they want. We're not just the people who figure out how to structure to get that thing accomplished.
But the goal state output definition, that is what is given to the machine. The goal state output definition can't work unless lots of information professionals go and change the state of all of the information using tools like what Joe makes in order to add context.
I think it's a yes and, right? Because you can't add context to content to have it do cool jobs without knowing why you'd want it to do cool jobs and aligning the humans to do less evil jobs, to bring in Andrew's talk.
I like it. I'll allow it. Thank you. Okay, I'm done being the interrogator. Kaarin, would you like to facilitate a second here?
Joe, I was wondering if there is some like step 6, or is it a step 6, or is it a standard question in the process of modeling that helps us not forget the human bodies? Like, is there a way in modeling process to help remind us of the key questions that are so easy to forget when you have to present to a board and get the thing out the door?
Yeah, I think you know, I was focused on modeling, but there's a larger process where the first step is you need to be aware and observe the world, the territory, the ground, to inform that model. So we don't want to make the models based on models. We need to interact and have that touchstone. And so, well, I didn't incorporate it here. Part of the practice that we have is observe, model, and then align. And it's an iterative pattern.
Yeah. And look, I love that. And we can't do any of this perfectly, right? You can't know what the thing you're making is going to do to every single person who touches it. You can't, but it doesn't mean you just should give up and just not do any of it. You know, there's ways to get reality checks. You know, there's ways to check back in and kind of recalibrate. But you know, if the money's coming in and the people you're actually trying to make happy aren't interested in that reality check, they're just interested in make line go up, then the incentives are perverse. And that's honestly behind a lot of what I talked about, right? The systemic incentives are pretty perverse in our economic and cultural like mechanisms that we live in. And so it takes, look, if I were given the opportunity to sell out a bunch of people's content on Reddit, but I'm gonna make more billions of dollars. Like I mean, I don't know. You put me in that position, I can't swear to you what I would do. I wish I could answer that I was, you know, all good. But especially, but I don't have the kind of personality that just wants to hoard more money. Or otherwise, I might be better off right now. I'm wired differently. Maybe that's it. But so I think there are bigger issues, but like that drive this sort of like almost like we're just going to shut off even thinking about that because that doesn't even matter, right? That's the thing that really gets me. If like I said, I think I made an off the cuff remark about like it's a colonizer mentality, right? The idea that you would just be like, well, I don't care if it's Creative Commons labeled or what, we're just gonna scoop it all up and and put it in this Cuisinart and then start selling, whatever cupcakes comes out of it.
Three-quarters of a word at a time.
Yeah. I mean, so that to me that was the sin in the beginning, and then the sin at the end is putting it out there and being like, look, this is magic, right? And because that's what's going to get the line go up. And so not to keep dwelling on, maybe I'm turning into a Marxist, I don't know, but anyway, but I'm just saying that to say that like there are huge perverse incentives to just not even bother doing the reality check in a lot of places. And that's the thing that I see happening. I feel like it's happening so much. So I'm not against computer mediated interaction. I'm not against, I love it. I mean, I got involved in this industry because I fell in love with what this stuff can do. But man, I had a different mentality about it than apparently a lot of people have. That's all.
To take it out of a more wicked problem and bring it to a problem in our controllable spheres, one piece of the puzzle I particularly find joy in operating in corporate America is finding the line go up excuses to do what's in the best interest of our user.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's my opening right there, right? Like those are such joyful moments of like having these pet projects, of which I have a very deep stack, right? And then listening in those conversations to, oh, this one, right? Oh, this one. This is finally the moment. And that is a joyful IA practice in and of itself. And I wanted to sprinkle that positivity note in here. Yeah. It's a fun little puzzle to play every day.
And Trojan horsing in, right?
Well,
a little bit.
Do so very like transparently. So if it's like a rainbow, sparkly neon Trojan horse.
Make the sparkles be war, dude. Cut it out.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a sales pitch, which I mean that's fine too. One of the things that I'm most excited about and why I can stomach saying that Tug is involved with AI is that our approach, we've found that the ethical management component, right? These AI agents are like employees that you put on the work floor with human beings, and you can't just put them there, just like you don't hire some random person that you have no idea how they're going to affect the work ecosystem. Understand the interplay between humans and AI agents, and we've seen great success when you put ethical management as opposed to just operational efficiency at the fore. And not only have we noticed that the efficiency does go up more than if you didn't, also job satisfaction for the humans who are there go up, and quality. And so I think that's something that I'm excited about. One of those hacks of like, if you take care of people, turns out you can actually get more line going up than if you don't.
One thing that strikes me is you can't model without talking. Right? There's all these studies about like cortisol level and texting versus talking. And we're increasingly in spreadsheets, not in conversations. my company's moving more and more to async culture where we do pre-read and then the meeting is like Q&A, which is lovely and efficient, but also reduces the amount of time you might talk about a topic. Our modeling kind of does the opposite. And like talking is healthy and good. That is grounding. So async and then going with an average is a lot different than async voting, modeling through it together, discussing it, aligning on a average.
Yeah, there's so many things in what you just said that my brain's like wants to say 3 or 4 things and see if I can catch them. One, I've really become so fascinated with how, like, I'll show up at a meeting at work and people are like, okay, the meeting might be named workshop or brainstorm or collaboration. And these things tend to be used interchangeably for the same stuff. And it's often just people show up and then somebody says, okay, so we got to figure out X. And then it's just a kind of free for all, right? And there's no structure, and if the whole design thinking movement, which, whole other topic with its own pros and cons, but did anything, at least it maybe helped to introduce this idea that, hey, there are models of collaborating that are better for certain kinds of decision making and figuring things out than others, right? And so there are tools we can use for that. And what I love about what Joe showed, right, is like, hey, that tool isn't useful for every conversation, but there are some it's extremely useful for, and how the hell would you do it otherwise? And so I think that's awesome. I do think though too that what you mentioned, Kaarin, about I remember years ago when I was one of my first jobs, and it was internal at a financial services company, and they had us all do Six Sigma training, and I was like, there was something about it that bugged me a little bit, and the more I saw how that was being utilized, I was realizing, like, okay, if you do this wrong, you can squeeze all the inefficiency out of every human endeavor in an enterprise. And what are you losing when you're squeezing the inefficiency out? Because I think I think from a certain lens, right, from a certain model, that's noise in the channel and we just don't need it. But from another model, that's the nutrition that makes, right, the stuff grow, where you get the good stuff. And but you don't always want the messy, inefficient thing. Sometimes you need the efficient, asynchronous, right? So, what ways of working together, like, is there a taxonomical, I don't know, or a typology, I guess, of these things? I'm sure that exists places. I remember reading Kevin's book years ago, and I don't remember a lot of it. But anyway, this is just an interesting thought to me that there are ways of doing this. And similarly for the stuff I was bringing up, right? It doesn't mean that you have to do everything with your customer or whoever, like, right there in front of you. Or all of them, which is impossible. But like, where are the appropriate places to do that core sampling, to figure out, like, hey, do we need to calibrate? How are these things going? And of course, a lot of that's just driven from the values of the organization and the leadership in it. What do they care about?
Shane, how are we doing? Do we have time, or do we need to switch to raffle giveaway mode now-ish? 5 minutes?
I want to, hey, Shane. I want to,
Semiotics. What does that mean? Piece 2. Sorry, Joe.
5, 4 now.
Oh, okay. Well, now I ruined it.
There's something I completely agree with you, Andrew, on not all quote unquote inefficiency is unproductive. I think of it like a a guided meditation where you focus most of the time on your breath and controlling and noting thoughts and letting them go, and but then at the end you let go of the trying and you let the thoughts do whatever, and that's an important part of the practice. In a yoga session, you go through the prescribed movements and you try and you pay attention to things, and at the end you have the shavasana and you just don't do anything. And that is my favorite part. And I see parallels in the modeling practice. There, I see value in having this extreme focus, like I described, and then not doing that and stepping back and saying, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but what about what I have here is actually interesting to me as a human being? Might not be interesting to any of you, but from where I'm coming from and the rest of the things I'm doing in the world, that part's interesting. And if I wouldn't have given myself permission to be a little less efficient and sit back and do something that maybe I wasn't supposed to be doing, I never would have found that little bit of novelty, that little bit of maybe it's innovation, maybe it's just joy. I don't know. But I think there's an important balance.
Joe, you are the most inspiring boss ever. And what you just said reminds me of what you told me about woodworking, that your favorite part is cleaning your tools after you've done it.
Mm. You know, in terms of this efficiency thing, and lots of other things that go on in the world, the old story of the goose that lays the golden eggs keeps coming to mind for me, and the foolishness of the person in the story who is like, I'm just going to cut that goose open and get those eggs out, and the mentality being that like, well, let's just extract it. Why do I have to feed this goose? Why do I have to clean up its shit? Why do I have to, like it's loud? And goose are dicks, right? I mean, they're mean. I don't want to have to deal with a goose. So just get those eggs out of there. And then what do you get? And I feel like we run into that a lot. And it's like, there's a certain amount of humanity and mess that you just need to be okay with, because that's where the magic is actually happening. You can't like, whatever, extract it and then have it run in some abstracted thing. It's not gonna be human anymore. You might get some value out of it, but it ain't the same thing.
The poet, she says how to make sense of any mess, not how to get rid of all your messes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we end there? Is with that our 5? Thanks, everybody. It's so nice to see you all.
Yes.
It really is.
Give some stuff away.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna
as
cry
we
now.
Prepare for our shavasana. There are.
That was awesome. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I think, Shane, do we have other things to share? I don't know that we do.
Not much. Yeah, I was just letting people see the Discord server that is available for continued participation in the community.
Great.
So have that as a public service announcement. Will be available at the provided link. And then from there, we're just hoping to see you all back next year.
Very good. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Shane. Yes, thanks again to the crew from SoCar. You want to stand up so we can give you a hand? Kaarin and Joe, Andrew and Matt, Dan, we thank you very much. Shane, thanks for being in the background, making it smooth, and see you all next year.